In today's video, I want to tell you guys what to look for in a modern power station. What's up guys, my name is Dan and welcome to Freely Roaming. There are a lot of power stations out in the market today. And I mean, every time you look, there's a new company putting on a new product. However, with all the stuff that's out there, how do you cut through all the noise and figure out exactly what you need? So for a lot of people, that choice is pretty easy. You have a certain budget and you have a certain number of watt hours that you want to be able to have based on what you're going to be using this power station for. So that can help you narrow down exactly which ones are in your range, both from the features perspective and the price. However, the new generation of power stations out there are offering a set of unique features that I think are really nice to have. And if you're used to these older power stations that basically just the battery connected to an inverter, you're gonna miss out on a lot of these useful features if you have never used them before. Of course, the big names that have big marketing budgets are gonna be the brands that you've heard of. But with all the companies that are out there making stuff, there are several gems that you may not have heard of. And because they don't have a huge marketing budget, they're not spending a lot of money getting their name out there. Generally speaking, the price is gonna be much better and much more competitive when it comes to features. So that's exactly what I want to talk to you guys about today. So let me go through the features that I look for in a modern power station, regardless of brand and price. Obviously, the first thing you look for is the size of the power station. Regardless of what you're going to be using this power station for, first and foremost, it has to fit in the space that you have dedicated for it. Maybe it's not as critical if you're tent camping or if you have a big RV, you're just going to be pulling this out from the back of your truck and maybe sitting on a table while you're using it. But still, where you need to store this when you're not using it can play a critical factor on which one you choose. And also size comes down to the right amount of watt hours that a particular power station has. If you're going to be using it to run Starlink, for example, you want to know how many hours it'll run your Starlink for. If you're going to be using it to run your computer, just for a couple hours a day, it's not quite as critical. If you want to use it to, let's say, power like an induction stovetop or a Keurig espresso maker, or things that take a lot of power, you want to get one that's properly sized with the inverter output to make sure that it can do that. For the most part, battery capacity is directly related to the physical dimension. The bigger the battery capacity, the bigger the unit. And also battery capacity is also directly related to how much AC output it has. The bigger the battery, the more capability it has to be able to output more power, which means the bigger the AC output it could potentially have. So battery stations are generally measured in terms of watt hours when it comes to the amount of capacity it has, as opposed to the more commonly known amp hours rating that raw batteries have. So watt hours is a better and more absolute unit of measurement when it comes to power and energy. Because with amp hours, you also have to know what voltage it is at for you to know how much power it's actually putting out. Just to give you a base idea about watt hours, a full-sized laptop, generally speaking, will go from 0% charge to 100% charge in about 100 watt hours. So if you got a 300 watt hour power station, it'll charge roughly your computer from 0 to 100 3 times. Now that's assuming it has 100% efficiency, which nothing does. Every watt hour that you consume, you're going to have a little bit of loss. We have gotten to the point with these power stations where it's pretty much between 75 to 90% efficiency is what we're getting. So there's a lot of videos out there that have tested the efficiency of power stations. And I've done a lot of them myself. But I feel like at this point, you can pretty much guarantee that you're going to land somewhere in the mid-80s efficiency rating. The next thing is the battery type. I hear a lot of people talk about, modern cell chemistry is lithium iron phosphate. But the reality is, lithium iron phosphate is actually pretty old technology. Lithium iron phosphate was used very commonly in the telecom and the computer server industry. They were used as backup power for several reasons. One is because in these environments, size and weight wasn't a huge issue. Two is that they have huge amount of cycle life. So if it was used for backup power in a server room environment, these will literally last a decade with daily cycling. And the really nice thing about lithium iron phosphate these days is that it is much cleaner, doesn't use any rare earth metals like cobalt or manganese. It of course still uses lithium, but we're still in the world of lithium batteries, so you can't really get away from that. And besides that, it just uses iron and phosphorus, which are commonly found everywhere in the world. It's much more sustainable and much more ethically mined. They do have less power density than your other types of lithium chemistry batteries. So because of that, the disadvantage comes at either slightly less capacity or slightly bigger battery. But with a more cycle life, these can have anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000 cycles before it gets to 80%. It means a much longer lasting unit. So you don't have to keep buying a new one every couple of years. The next thing I look for is fast AC charging. Older power stations used to take hours and hours to charge them fully. Some of the earlier ones require you to charge overnight for you to be able to completely replenish a dead battery. These new power stations now offer really high AC charging rates. The modern ones boast fast charging that can go from 0 to 80 or 90% in as fast as 45 minutes to an hour. That's actually really amazing for somebody who's, let's say, camping with it. You don't have any other kind of power source. Maybe you don't have solar, but you're at a campground with no hookups. Perhaps there's a cafe or there's a restroom with a plug. You can use your battery all day, and when it dies, just go to an outlet nearby. It'll charge up in 45 minutes to an hour, and you're good to go again. Be aware though, these fast charging is not supposed to be used all the time, because the faster you charge these batteries, the faster they degrade. So for the most part, I would still charge them at as slow of a rate as you can handle, and only charge them at the super fast rate when you need to. The next thing that manufacturers are putting into modern power stations is an integrated AC power supply. A lot of these companies are not making you carry around this massive brick of an AC power supply anymore. They're built into the unit, so all you have to have is basically a computer monitor cable, plugs into the wall, and if you happen to forget to bring one, these are very common cables you can pretty much find anywhere. Pass-through charging is something that I have been talking about for a long time. And on top of pass-through charging, now a major feature that these power stations have are uninterruptible power supply features. That means that when you have your power station plugged into the wall, your AC outlets will pass the power through, so that the power that's coming in from the wall still goes to charge the batteries, and the power that you're consuming is coming directly from the wall. And when your battery gets fully charged, your battery stays in the float mode rather than having the power that you're drawing from the AC inverter coming from the battery into your inverter and into your device. That's going to help preserve the life of the battery, and these UPS modes that they have now are in place in case of a power outage. Because your device is using power directly from the wall when it's plugged in like that, if that power happens to cut out, the UPS feature in the power station will automatically detect that and switch that over in as little as 1/60th of a second. And because alternating current in the US is generally 60 Hertz, that means it's alternating 60 times a second. In 1/60th of a second, when it switches from the wall outlet to your inverter, your device won't even notice that it happened. Okay, the next thing is fast solar charging. Some of the older devices can only handle upwards of 100 watts of solar. These newer ones can handle multiple times over that. This unit, for example, can handle AC charge of 400 watts and also solar charge up to 300 watts. So that means with a 300 watt hour capacity, assuming you're bringing in 300 watts from your solar panels, it can charge via solar in just about an hour as well. Be aware that solar efficiency is much, much lower. So even if you have a 300 watt solar panel, you're probably only going to be able to bring in a fraction of that. So even though it can handle 300 watts, if you want to actually get 300 watts of charge input from your solar panels, you probably want to get something like 400 watts of solar. So these higher capacity MPPT charge controllers that are built into these units now will get you back up running, even if you are completely off-grid. Another thing that it's a must-have these days, and I've been talking about this for a long time, is a regulated DC output. And when I talk about regulated DC output, I mean these 5525 ports and also this cigarette lighter plug. If you have a lithium iron phosphate battery, by default the nominal voltage is 12.8 volts, which is much better than lithium ion batteries to begin with. But some of these batteries actually have regulated output on top of that puts out in the 13 volt range for things like power coolers, refrigerators, or things that are sensitive to DC voltage. It is critical. It is something that you must have these days. And speaking of DC output, the most common way people use these devices is actually through the USB ports. And one of the features I think modern power stations must have is USB-C power delivery. Most computers these days will have USB-C, and a lot of these computers will allow you to charge through USB-C. And with USB-C 3.2, you can charge at as much as 100 watts For a 100 watt-hour computer battery, it'll charge it up in an hour. And frankly, that's what a lot of people use these batteries for, is when they want to work remotely and they want to be sitting at a picnic table, sitting in the back of their truck, sitting in their camper. They don't want to drain their battery down in the camper. They just get one of these and plug their computer into it. And having USB-C power delivery makes it really easy because you don't have to run an inverter and plug in your AC charger for your computer to charge through an inverter, which is less efficient. 60 watt USB-C power delivery is a minimum. 100 watts is what I prefer. However, not all of these power stations with USB-C power delivery ports will have what's called bidirectional USB-C power delivery, meaning that not only can you pull power from the power station through that port, you can also charge the power station with that port. I have a couple of power stations that have that, but unfortunately that's one of the shortcomings for this unit. It doesn't have it, but because it's got such good AC and DC charging, I feel like it's less of an issue. But it is something that I really like personally. Be aware that if you want to use USB-C power delivery at 100 watts, you have to make sure you have a compatible cable. When you buy the cable, if you're not using the one that came with your computer, assuming you're using it that way, make sure that is rated for 100 watts. Speaking of USB charging, it is also important that it has USB quick charge. At the very, very minimum, quick charge 2.0, which will give you 18 watts per port. And if you have quick charge 3.0, that's even better. That'll give you 36 watts per port, assuming that you're plugging in a device to the USB-C QC 3.0 port can support that speed. Another feature that I really like, not a lot of power stations have it, and this one does, is a wireless Qi charger right on top. And a lot of the time is the design issue, because in order for a wireless charger to work, there has to be a flat and level surface on the top. And depending on how they were designing these power stations, they may or may not have a flat surface on the top. But this one happens to have one, and I really like that about it. Lastly, this is the feature that I think all modern power stations have to have nowadays, is Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connectivity with an app that you can control the power station with. It may sound like a gimmick, but if you have ever used one that has an app where it lets you control the device remotely, it opens up a whole world of possibilities. Through the app, you can connect through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to the power station. And within the app, you can see exactly how much power is left. And what's even better than that is you can turn off the DC and or the AC ports remotely. Some of the more modern ones will also have a scheduling feature that lets you turn things on and off based on time. I think that's super cool. If you're out there camping or in the wilderness, you're basically bringing a little bit of home automation with you. Setting a timer or being able to turn off your power station remotely. Let's say you're laying down in your bed and you forgot to turn your power station off. And it is a matter of having no battery in the morning when you wake up because you forgot to turn it off, or being able to charge your phone, charge your camera batteries, charge everything you want because you have this feature that you didn't have to get up and out of bed to do it. I use this feature all the time, and I think all modern power stations should have it. So that brings me to this particular unit. You guys have heard all the stuff that I think modern power stations should have. And with all these features, generally speaking, it's going to be a pretty expensive high-end unit. But like I said at the beginning of this video, it doesn't have to be that way. There are a lot of companies making products these days. You're going to find some gems every now and then. And that's what I found in this unit. This is the AllPowers R600. Let me just give you some specs. It has a 299 watt-hour battery. It has lithium iron phosphate cell chemistry. And instead of it being a 4S 12.8 volt nominal battery pack, they've actually put together an 8S 25.6 volt battery pack, which is going to be more efficient. It supports up to 400 watts of AC charging, which means you'll easily top off this battery in an hour. And it supports up to 300 watts of solar charging, which is really incredible. And it doesn't just have one USB-C power delivery port, it actually has two. And each one of them can deliver up to 100 watts through USB-C PD. But the one downside I mentioned earlier in some of these units, this USB-C PD port is unfortunately not bidirectional. They have two USB-C A ports that are rated for Quick Charge 2.0, which means it can output 18 watts each. So with the 4 USB ports, the 2 C ports, and the 2 A ports, you can output a simultaneous amount of 236 watts. And that is a huge number. It does have Bluetooth and a AllPowers R600 app for connectivity. Right now the app is still pretty rudimentary. It just shows you the power levels. You can turn on and off the DC and the AC ports, but there is no scheduling feature. But I think it's just a matter of updating the firmware to be able to do that. It does have uninterrupted power supply mode as well as pass-through charging, really critical for me. And the best thing about this, it is way cheaper than the competitor. And I think right now, as of beginning of July, end of June 2023, you can buy this for just over 200 bucks on Amazon with a discount code. They also have two options for solar panels. So they have a 100 watt, this is the SP027. It's super light and it's a bifold panel, which I really like. And these legs have this built-in elastic, because when you put these away, one of the most annoying thing is this thing just goes flopping around. But because it's elastic, it's very easy to put back into place. They also make a 200 watt unit, which is basically the same. Instead of a bifold, it is a quad fold. So it'll fold out to be twice as wide. This is a little bit more unwieldy when you try to set it up. You do have to kind of figure out a process compared to the bifold. But like I said, if you're completely off the grid and you're camping somewhere where you can't just drag your power station to plug in somewhere, something like this, a big 200 watt solar panel is really cool to have. And of course there's some cons, but for this price range, you can't really fault it for any of the things that I'm about to mention. Number one, no bidirectional USB-C, which is something that I really like to have, because a lot of the times what I use these power stations for is to charge my computer. And I have a MacBook Pro with a USB-C port for charging. And my charging brick is a 100 watt charging brick that plugs into the wall. I just use the cable to charge my computer, and I actually use the brick to charge the power station if it has USB-C power delivery bidirectional. But because it doesn't have it, in order for me to charge it, I do have to bring that cable around, or I have to bring the solar panel around. It's not a big deal because I'm off grid most of the time anyways, so having an AC charger isn't really that critical for me. The second thing is that the cooling fan in this unit is not variable speed, which means it is on all or nothing. The cooling fan only turns on when you're drawing a lot of power or if you're charging from the AC outlet. And it can be a little bit loud. So depending on how you're using it, if you're using this in a small space, small echoey space, and you're plugged into the wall, you're gonna hear this fan kick on. So maybe in a future model, they'll come out with a unit with a variable fan. And the last thing is, it is a little bit big for the capacity that it has. And it's not all that heavy, but for something that's this size, I've seen units this size have as much as 400 to 500 watt hours of power. But as I mentioned before, they have the charging brick built into the unit now, and also design-wise, they made the top flat so that they can have a wireless Qi charger. And all of these design choices made this unit just a little bit bigger than it needs to be. Personally, I don't mind trading for a slightly bigger unit to have these additional features. It also has a really good warranty. This has got a 5-year warranty, and it's got a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you buy it and don't like it, they do take it back. Right now, like I said earlier, on Amazon, it is $209 with the coupon, and you can buy one of these and this 100 watt solar panel as a kit right now for only $319. That's basically a turnkey off-grid power system. If you're gonna take it camping, go on a road trip, I think that's a perfect setup for not a lot of money. So that's it. These are the things that I will look for in a modern power station. There's a lot out there. I'm showing you guys one in this video, but go ahead and do some shopping, and based on the things that I talked about, you can go and see which ones have these features and what kind of prices they're selling for, and you'll know that this is really good value. I also have a special announcement for you guys. On July 7th, 2023, this year, if you're watching this video as it's being launched, I'm going to be at Overland Expo Pacific Northwest in Redmond, Oregon. And I'm teaching a class on the 7th, Friday the 7th at 11 a.m. in Classroom 1. And it's going to be all about DIY lithium and DIY solar. If you're going to be attending Overland Expo Pacific Northwest this year, I'd love for you guys to attend my class. I am going to be giving away a special prize for one person who attends the class. Follow my Instagram below and I'll be posting the details on exactly how you can win that prize. I hope you guys have found this video useful, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.